ye, hear ye. Welcome to what might turn into my most controversial Which Smash Bros video yet. You all left suggestions for which video in this series you want to see next. My patrons voted on those suggestions, and the winner was which Smash Bros have committed a crime. Your lust for violence is somewhat concerning, but I shall appease. First, we gotta talk about the rules for this video, and there are a lot more than normal, but they're important, so don't even think about skipping ahead. Starting out with the usual rules, number 1, I'm only counting games, no TV shows, movies, comics, or official art. Only the characters' games outside of the Smash Bros series and their official manuals can be used as evidence. 2, if the name's generic, the character's generic. An Inkling is any Inkling, a Pokemon trainer is any Pokemon trainer, etc. But Dr. Mario is Mario. 3, I only need to name one example for each character for it to be considered proven. You're welcome to leave other examples in the comments, but I promise there's a polite way to do it. And if your comment starts with, "you forgot," rewrite it. I almost certainly didn't forget. I just didn't say it or don't agree with it. Or didn't know it, and that's okay too. And even if I did forget, that phrase is just triggering to YouTubers, so stop, please. 4, contestants will be either sorted into definitive proof, where there's proof in the game that the character has committed a crime, or if you have the opportunity as the player to do a crime without it resulting in a game over, or no proof, where there's no in-game proof that these folks have committed a crime. Literally, innocent until proven guilty. Now let's talk crime rules, which feels like an oxymoron. Today, we're only going to be counting felonies and misdemeanors. I don't care about infractions. If you think I'm gonna look through every game to figure out whether or not a character is jaywalked, you are mistaken. Felonies and misdemeanors only. And we're pretty much looking exclusively at federal laws and not state laws. I don't care about that one specific law in Missouri that says you can legally wear sharks' shoes. If it's against federal law, that's what I care about today. The exception being, if there's not necessarily a federal law against something, but every single state has a unanimous state law against it, I'll count that. Now you might have noticed I'm talking state and federal laws, and that's because, well, I know that all these games take place in different universes and different time periods and would have their own laws. That information is pretty rarely explicitly stated, and we have to base this on something, so I'm gonna base it on the law that I know best, and that's the US law. But I will take general time periods into account, and if there's something in the games that pretty explicitly implies their rules are different, that will take priority. For example, if a game's world contains magic that no one really reacts to, I'm not gonna judge magic use based on our laws, because clearly in that world, people use magic. Make sense? Like using a superstar that makes you invincible is just a thing in that world. It's not a one-to-one for using drugs. Same for magic potions, etc. I'm trying to determine whether they committed a crime in their universe. The cases where murder will be excused is if enemy soldiers are killed during wartime or under the umbrella of self-defense, but only if the character is attacked first. Finally, animals can do crime. I thought about this one for a long time, and it's way more important to specify than you might think. It's not about whether or not animals are tried for their crimes, it's about whether or not they did a crime. And if Sonic and Fox are fair game, then Pokemon and the Duck Hunt duo should be too, since every animal on this roster appears to possess plenty of awareness and control over their actions. They're all fair game. Okay, I know that was a lot, but it was all extremely necessary. Equally necessary is a spoiler alert for all of these characters' games. But let's start this long journey. And if you stick around till the end, I'll tell you about the felony I've committed. I'm not joking. Also, I'm changing up how I'm doing the chart this time because I think it'll make it easier to tell who we're looking at. Let me know your thoughts on if this works better or not. Starting at the top, I'm always gonna look at Mario Party and Mario Kart first. Why wouldn't I? It makes my job easier. But in this case, the games are actually pretty tricky because they're organized events. Anything that happens in the context of Mario Party is part of the game, so stealing a star isn't actually stealing if it's in the stated rules. Same for Mario Kart. You may want to immediately jump to reckless driving or assault, but speeding and attacking each other are all part of the sport. And since this is broadcast and they've set things up like a starting line, we must assume this is all official and not like illegal street racing. Even courses like the airport seem like there's no way you could race there, but when you take into consideration that the planes we see taking off are in a different area and there are no active planes on the designated track, you can assume that the producers of the race have been granted a sectioned off part of the airport to set up a course in. However, I draw the line at endangering bystanders, as there's no way this could be deemed legal. I'm not talking about the bystanders watching behind the rails, I'm talking about the ones on the tracks. The subway course is wild, but maybe since the subway's on a track, I might be able to be convinced that these are empty and running automatically, or that there's an employee driving it but no passengers. But other courses, I'm not so convinced. There are some courses that have cars that don't appear to actually be going anywhere, since the track is a loop with nowhere to get off, like Toad's Turnpike. So sure, those might be hired hands too. But Mushroom City? These people are just trying to get around. And if that doesn't convince you, what about the animals? Moo Moo Meadows, you think those cows aren't real? You hit a cow? That's animal abuse. And while the DS version of Moo Moo Meadows doesn't have cows on the track, it does have a mini game where the entire point is to hit Monty moles that are minding their own business. So Rob's got blood on his hands too. The entire cast of Mario Kart 8 NDS are guilty of committing a crime. Don't get me wrong, these racers aren't completely innocent aside from this instance. Mario kills countless enemies that fully aren't attacking him. Bowser, Bowser Jr., and DK are all guilty of kidnapping. Link breaks people's property and steals their goods. Inklings might be free to graffiti to their heart's content in their world, but they still illegally steal Salmonid's eggs, considering unauthorized contact with Salmonids is against the law, and the shady Mr. Grizz is certainly not the one to grant that authorization. The villager can completely destroy the integrity of the local ecosystem, which isn't actually illegal, but you running around bopping villagers on the heads with a net while you do it most certainly is. And don't even get me started on the malpractice of Dr. Mario throwing pills all over the place. But considering they're all covered with Mario Kart, I didn't even have to say all those. That was a bonus. But we're out of time for bonuses, so let's move along. Piranha Plant is one that can a lot of times go hand in hand with the others in Mario Kart, but that's not necessarily the case for this one. In the context of Mario Kart, they snap at racers both off the track and as an item, sure, but one could argue that they are merely fulfilling their role as part of the sport, hired to be an obstacle or an item. And they are a part of Bowser's troops, so attacking Mario in other games should be fair play, right? Well, not really, because they're a danger when it's not wartime too. Like in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, Piranha Plants are an enemy, and Bowser isn't even in those games. So Piranha Plant is guilty of assault. Onto the Metroid series, Samus Aran is a bounty hunter, which actually is legal, but a bounty hunter is only meant to bring criminals in, not kill them. And Samus is acting in her own interest when she kills Ridley anyway to get revenge on him for killing her parents, which, along with many other space piratey things, makes Ridley guilty as well. And then when Samus is working with the Galactic Federation, she disobeys orders, breaks and enters into a restricted laboratory, and then explodes it. Great. Her dark counterpart is just as guilty though, as she has assault and attempted murder under her belt, along with many other things. One bounty hunter who works surprisingly above board is Captain Falcon. His F-Zero GX description specifies that he brings his targets in, making it 100% legal. But while most of the races he participates in are legal, he doesn't have a perfect record. For example, in the same game, Nielsen enters him into a race in Mute City under a different name and puts him in a disguise so that he can bet money on him, which is 100% illegal. This is like if LeBron James wore a disguise to play in a local free throw competition that had a cash prize. I was gonna use an analogy that included gambling, but I genuinely don't know if there's a step between amateur games and the NBA that people gamble on. Point is, that's fraud. Definition of fraud, wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. They can pass it off as Captain Falcon not knowing what was going on all they want, but he was the one who put his foot to the pedal to win that race, and he was totally gonna accept that money if he didn't get interrupted. He even says thank you.
This is your share. Take it.
So at best, he's an accessory to fraud and fully guilty. Kirby is next on the roster, and remember how I said it's only self-defense if the enemy attacks first? Yeah, Kirby will eat anything in sight, regardless of if it's doing its own thing. In Kirby's Return to Dreamland, Meta Knight and King DDD can also kill enemies that are attacking, so all three are going under guilty. Fox, Falco, and Wolf are interesting. All three are mercenaries, which is such a gray area. Being a mercenary isn't illegal. Participating in combat is where it gets fuzzy. See, the most commonly accepted law regarding mercenaries comes from Article 47 of Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions, where it says that a mercenary shall not have the right to be a lawful combatant or a prisoner of war, and then defines what a mercenary is. This doesn't say they can't be hired, just that they can't be a combatant or prisoner of war because they aren't granted the same rights as soldiers. They could, in theory, carry out missions that aren't direct combat. And also, their list of descriptors for mercenaries is known to be extremely easy to circumnavigate. But it's the International Convention Against the Recruitment, Use, Financing, and Training of Mercenaries, a UN treaty from 2001, that prevents the recruitment and use of mercenaries as a whole. Though some hugely important permanent members of the UN Security Council, including the US, have not signed this, rendering it meaningless if you're not in a country that ratified it. Also, remember that I'm taking the game's universe and apparent rules into account. And not only is this supposedly set in the distant future, but also it seems like a world where mercenaries are totally fine. General Pepper has no problem calling upon the Star Fox team repeatedly, never seeming to try to keep it under wraps. Wolf is openly a mercenary, and they even talk about other mercenary groups with no indication that their work is illegal. It seems like mercenary groups taking part in combat is pretty dang common in this space warring world, so I'm not gonna say that fighting as a mercenary is illegal. So, that being said, Fox can hit friendly dinosaurs in Star Fox Adventures, so he's done a crime. And Wolf is stowed away in an illegal hideout recruiting criminals, so done a crime. Now Falco used to be the leader of a galactic gang, but that's about all we know from that time. And being in a gang is not inherently a crime. Fights, but is hired to for war. And as far as I know, hasn't hit any dinosaurs. The closest I could get was that he's there during the Katina frontline base mission, which is notorious for mass amounts of friendly fire. But Slippy is the one who says that it's hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys, and every time Bill chastises you for friendly fire, it's because you as Fox hit an ally. There's no proof that Falco actually hits any allies. So even though it seems very likely that Falco probably committed some crimes in his time as a gang leader, I don't think there's anything in the games that proves this. Before we get to the Pokemon themselves, let's look at the Pokemon trainer. I know so many people are itching to pin animal abuse on them, but I don't think this holds up. Just like how superstars aren't drugs, Pokemon fighting isn't dog fighting. In this world, Pokemon like to battle. It's inherent to their beings. They want to get stronger, seek out strong trainers by challenging them, and flat out refuse to fight for any trainer they don't respect. They form bonds with their trainers and enjoy staying with them. Starting in Generation 6, Pokemon who have a high enough affection rating will have an alternate initial battle dialogue, like Pikachu is bursting with enthusiasm for the battle, or Greninja is expecting you to come up with a great strategy. I get that it's easy for us to vilify Pokemon battles and that it's often the butt of a joke, but if we're looking at this realistically, in the Pokemon universe, Pokemon like battling and are doing it voluntarily, with the rare contrary case, because that's the universe that Nintendo built. Does that mean the Pokemon trainer gets off scot-free? No, they just get pinned for something much more mundane: trespassing and theft. They break into a few areas they know are restricted and take the stuff lying around, like the Team Galactic headquarters, for example. Furthermore, national parks are considered federal property, and thus you cannot remove anything you didn't bring in, making taking this shiny stone from the national park in Johto a federal offense. Get 'em, boys. Alright, now let's talk about the Pokemon themselves. The Pokemon were the initial reason I felt the need to establish the rules that animals can do crimes. Because I understand the impulse to say that a Pokemon doing a crime is the same thing as a dog doing a crime, and a dog can't commit crimes because they don't know what a human crime is. And number one, that's why dogs aren't tried legally for human crimes. They are sometimes punished for human crimes though. But you can do a crime without knowing you're doing a crime. And this list is who's done a crime. Number two, Pokemon are pretty established as having awareness of what's going on. Heck, Lucario can understand human speech. They can and will snub or ignore trainers who they don't respect, and interact with trainers and each other in an extremely coherent way despite the language gap. So if you're wanting to discount Pokemon just because they're an animal, you'd have to discount Donkey Kong too, who also can't speak human. Yeah, they're counting. And while many can learn the moves Thief and Trick, which steals items from other Pokemon, they will only keep the things they steal that belong to wild Pokemon, which is a whole other can of worms in regards to morality. So a much easier catch-all is that they're accomplices of their trainers' crimes. Might feel unfair, but them's the breaks. If they can refuse to do other things and can refuse to accompany trainers they don't respect, they have the ability to just say no. Let that be a lesson to you. Pokemon and their trainers commit crimes. But we're not done getting people on trespassing, because Ness and Lucas aren't any better. Ness trespasses right before beating up a group of police officers, which, I mean, they started it. And Lucas both trespasses and steals someone's identity by lying via omission to do so. But honestly, both of these boys get got anyways, because when you're high enough level, enemies will run away from you and you can still hunt them down and kill them. Brutal. Looking at the ice climbers, while some mountains have private age restrictions, there's no federal law that states a minimum age for mountain climbing. So despite these children putting themselves in horrific danger, they're not breaking any laws there. However, the ice climbers can hit the topi with their hammer, who are just trying to fill in the holes in the floor and aren't actually trying to attack them. So that would be assault. Or animal abuse, depending on how you look at it. While I previously mentioned Link's habit of breaking people's property and stealing their stuff, Zelda has officially joined the ranks too with Echoes of Wisdom! Congrats! Crimes! And of course, Young Link and Toon Link follow suit, also stealing stuff from temples as well. Now Sheik is an interesting story. A lot of times Sheik gets crossed off with Zelda, but I'm not so sure if that's the case here. See, if Sheik run a ton of games, I wouldn't have a problem being as general with Sheik as I am with Zelda. But really, Sheik is the Ocarina of Time Zelda. It's that specific plot that has her turn into Sheik, but the other Zeldas are descendants or ancestors that, thus far, haven't been shown to turn into Sheik. Then there's Hyrule Warriors, but my point still stands. The question is if Sheik or the Ocarina of Time Zelda have committed any crimes. If one has, both have. Zelda's pretty clear. When she's a kid, she says she's spying, but this type of spying wouldn't be considered illegal espionage because she's a member of government in her own country trying to ensure its security. The American Bar Association specifies the difference between spying advancing national security and corporate interests or wrongful acts, and the CIA's definition of espionage includes the intent to harm the US or aid a foreign power. So laws against espionage, like what's covered in the Espionage Act, is centered around leaking the nation's classified information, which, yes, Zelda does do. But again, there's no intent to harm the home country or aid a foreign country, which is key. Her authority as a royal also helps. And Zelda disguising herself as Sheik isn't committing identity theft since she's not assuming the identity of an existing person, just a Sheikah, and it's not fraud because there's no monetary gain. She's just doing it to protect herself and ensure her safety. Now, Sheik I thought I might get with trespassing in a temple, but I'll tell you what, Nintendo really covered their booties there. Every time you encounter Sheik, it's not in the temple itself. It's usually somewhere outside or nearby. The only temple that Sheik enters is the Temple of Time, the temple in Hyrule Castletown, which she has domain over. Sheik has committed no crime. And to round out the Zelda crew, Ganondorf has, of course, committed a crime. Kidnapping, destroying villages, trying to take over the world, you name it. Oh Lord, Fire Emblem. This is always the worst category for me. There are so many people and I don't play any of them. Okay, let's do it. Alright, so recruiting child soldiers was my first go-to, but actually in Palutena's guidance dialogue, Verde says he's 15, Pit says, is that legal in regards to him being a fighter, and Verde says it is in Ostia. Even though we're not counting Smash as canon story-wise, these pieces of information about the characters, along with Snake's codec conversations, are basically a vehicle for the creators to tell us about the characters, so I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be taken at face value, unless in the conversation they make it clear that the speaking character is joking or doesn't actually know. So I'm gonna take it at face value and assume there are different fighting age restrictions in that universe. Another thing that's gonna change how we judge these characters is the time period and the situation. Clearly these games are set in a similar time period to our Middle Ages, when laws were much different. Like, the Geneva Conventions weren't a thing. And since it's mainly set during wartime, that affects things. Not to mention a lot of these characters are royalty, which makes this so friggin' complex. So okay, back then, once you defeated an enemy troop in battle, you were totally allowed to loot and pillage the castle or city, especially with permission from a higher up. And any people from the opposing side who remained were taken as prisoners, and the rulers could pretty much do whatever they wanted with them. So a lot of what happens in the Fire Emblem series wouldn't have been seen as a crime. However, this was also a time where there was very little separation between church and state, and looting churches and killing churchmen were expressly forbidden, which means that in all the games where these characters fight priests, bishops, clerics, etc., they are committing a crime. And every single one has been in a game where this happens. Staying on the subject of the past and the involvement of the church and government, I want to jump over to Simon and Richter of the Castlevania series, who are vampire hunters. They're both part of the Belmont family, who have been granted explicit permission from the church to pursue and kill Dracula and rid the land of all of the other evil beings they come across. Which makes pinning anything on them a lot harder, as almost all of Simon's games start at Dracula's castle. And since vampires weren't considered to be human or have rights, any claim to destruction of property or theft is null and void because as far as society's concerned, they didn't have those rights in the first place. Simon can eat all the wild chicken he wants. No one owns it as far as the state's concerned. In fact, Simon was almost home free, since in the games where he does visit villages, he legally buys items instead of taking them, and only attacks when he's being attacked. But it was the teeniest little thing that got him, and that's breaking walls in village buildings to reveal secret shopkeepers. You can break down all the walls you want in abandoned vampire castles, Simon, but in a village, that's vandalism. And even if he's guilty of other things, I'll get Richter on the same charge. At the beginning of Castlevania Rondo of Blood, he goes through a city that's been attacked and breaks some stuff himself. Just because someone else broke things first doesn't mean that you can too, Richter. They could have rebuilt around that candle holder. And now they gotta get a new one of those too. Let's get back on track with Mr. Game & Watch. While illegal dumping of oil is just an infraction, I'm gonna call animal abuse, as that cage is far too small for 2 adult lions. Mr. Game & Watch is guilty. The Kid Icarus series begs the question, can angels and gods do a crime? And I'm saying yes. If animals can do a crime, gods can too. Pit goes into a human village and breaks pottery, so we can say vandalism for him. Dark Pit pretty much immediately tries to attack Pit and definitely immediately punches Pandora, so assault there. And then I was shocked to learn from the Kid Icarus manual that originally Palutena and Medusa ruled over Angel Land together, but because Medusa liked to dry up humans' crops and turn them into statues, Palutena, quote, changed Medusa into an ugly monster and banished her to the deep dark underworld. I can understand making her leave, but there was literally no reason to turn her into an ugly monster? Which makes it fall under cruel and unusual punishment, which protects against excessively degrading and humiliating punishments. And we already know that Palatine does not have the best judgment when it comes to punishments that fit the crime. All three are guilty. Now, Snake isn't going to get charged with terrorism since that was a smear campaign. However, him faking his own death to avoid criminal prosecution is evading the law, which is going to be a crime for Snake. You would be amazed at just how many criminal offenses a blue hedgehog can accrue. To name a few: destruction of public property, fleeing a crime scene, piloting a space shuttle without a license. Oddly enough, him buying from the black market is iffy, since most of the laws regarding the black market revolve around selling illegal goods rather than buying them. But Sonic isn't really one to care about breaking laws. Heck, let's turn to the hedgehog himself to see how he feels about it.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and mark him off. Because the Pikmin that Olimar harvests so freely accompany him and does what he asks, this is not a case of enslavement. However, there are various creatures that don't initialize attacks on your Pikmin that you can attack, like butterflies, Mammuta, and bread bugs, so Captain Olimar is getting charged with assault/animal abuse. Mega Man, however, can't exactly get hit with the same assault charge, since the enemies he attacks are all robots and are generally attacking him first. And when he faces off against Dr. Wily, he always spares him. Except one little time where Mega Man fully attempts to murder Wily. Wily even says that robots can't hurt humans, and Mega Man says he's more than a robot, and then says, die. He might have gotten interrupted, but that's attempted murder. Next, we have our exercising duo, and they really stay in their lane. I can't prove they're using performance-enhancing drugs or anything, so as far as I know, both Wii Fit Trainer and Little Mac are crime-free. Good job, guys. Pac-Man is another character that's gonna get an assault charge for attacking enemies that aren't attacking him, and Shulk is right behind him, since enemies won't attack Shulk when he's 6 levels above them. He also attacks with the intent to kill Metalface out of revenge, but either way, both these boys are guilty. And since we covered Shulk, we might as well cover Pyra and Mithra too. They can get got on the same charge, but also, it is heavily implied that they married Rex before having babies with him, and every state has a law against polygamous marriages. Marrying an object is unlawful, which is what the Blades are despite how human they may look. And I would love to know how old Rex was when they married him, considering he's 15 when they meet. Anyway, also attacks enemies that don't attack first, so crimes were committed. The Duck Hunt duo are next on the list, and while we've established that animals can do crime, I don't think these two have. We have no choice but to assume that this is legal hunting going on, and so these two are doing nothing wrong by participating in it. Also, I just realized how wild it was to imply that the duck is participating in the hunting, but you know what I mean. These two are clear. With characters from a series called Street Fighter, you know we're gonna look at the laws on street fighting. And sure enough, street fighting is illegal because it disrupts public order. Now, some people may bring up the fact that mutual combat is legal in Washington and Texas. However, there are certain caveats to that. In Washington, mutual combat is a defense through case law. It's not actually written out in statutory text. And there are limits to it. There can still be prosecution if the fight leads to significant injury, if consent is withdrawn, or if the fight causes a public disturbance.
Editing Anna here. I felt the need to clear this up a bit. There is no Washington law or statute that legalizes mutual combat. Mutual combat can be used as a defense for an assault charge if the fight was not in a public place and wasn't a domestic dispute, but even so, while this may help you avoid criminal prosecution, the parties can still sue in civil court for damages incurred. Now, if the fight is public, that automatically falls under Washington's disorderly conduct law, making it illegal. Then there's the Seattle Code that specifies that it is against the law to fight in public, but if you do and you're prosecuted, you may use the defense that it was licensed or authorized by law. This is where the idea that you can get a cop to authorize a fight on the street came from. But the main point is that Washington law in general outlaws fights in public outright and doesn't expressly legalize mutual combat. It can just be attempted as a defense for an assault charge with limitations. This was way more than you needed to know. Okay, thanks, bye.
In Texas, mutual combat is a defense under Penal Code 2206, which applies if the fight did not result in serious bodily injury or if the alleged victim was aware of the risks but consented. This would be the only case in which the street fighting in the game would be legal, but it doesn't matter because in the rules of the video I said federal law trumps state law. But Double Bluff, it didn't matter anyway because they're entering in tournaments, which is different from street fighting since it's legally sanctioned. Triple Bluff, those tournaments are often hosted by criminal organizations, meaning they're illegal. Ryu and Ken have done a crime. On that same note, we can mark Terry as guilty due to the tournament hosted by Geese Howard. And then Kazuya killed his father and grandfather, so there are probably some bigger fish to fry there. But guilty. The only other fighter left who escapes this fate is Min Min, who only participates in legally sanctioned tournaments as far as I can tell. And in her world, these extendable arms are just kind of a thing. Min Min is not guilty. Cloud has worked as a mercenary, but the main on-screen evidence we have of attacking without being attacked first is when he attempts to get revenge on Sephiroth. After Cloud makes a move, he's attacked back, to which he then throws Sephiroth over the rail, but the important part is that Cloud made the first move. However, Sephiroth is no angel either, and even the angel on the list did a crime, so that's not saying much. But Sephiroth does his fair share of killing as well, even taking out entire towns. So both Final Fantasy boys are guilty. Speaking of angels, we've got the angel hunter, Bayonetta. The angel killing is actually not the problem here though, as the angels attack her first. But her slate isn't clean as she causes massive amounts of damage, destroying public property, artifacts, and gravestones, among other things. Also, her original goal is to uncover her memories, so she's really initiating all of this. This isn't like an official war she's a part of or anything. She's acting independently, which makes her pursuit of murder unlawful. King K. Rool's trying to take over the world and all, but way more importantly, he stole Donkey Kong's banana horde. That's theft. And Hero and Steve can join those ranks, as those two are perfectly comfortable going into private establishments and residences and taking other people's things. All of them did a crime. While going into someone's mind doesn't technically have a law attached to it, Joker and his Phantom Thieves of Hearts crew have committed plenty of other crimes that do have one-for-one laws attached to them. Things like sending threats with their calling cards, even hijacking the airwaves to broadcast those threats, destruction of property, evading arrest, possession of a deadly weapon in school, and the list goes on.
Is it me? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain.
Joker is most definitely guilty. Banjo and Kazooie are two more that fall into the trap of killing NPCs that aren't actively trying to hurt them and therefore have committed a crime. And finally, we have Sora, who rivals Sonic and Joker in terms of the sheer variety of crimes he's committed. I'm not gonna name all of them, but you got theft, aiding and abetting pirates, stolen valor, assaulting a monarch, and most importantly, cyber crimes, which just scratches the surface. So yeah, Sora has done many a crime. Members of the jury, I present to you the list of Smash fighters accused of crimes. I don't know why, as the judge, I'm presenting to a jury at all, but hey. Which one of these fighters most surprised you? And which least surprised you? Also, as promised, I will tell you about the felony that I committed. After I tell you about the merch I made that you can get right now. I got so many good things available for you. I got shirts, I got hats, I got hoodies and mugs and stickers and so much more. Click the link in the description, have a browse, and I really hope you like it because I designed all of it myself. Anytime is a good time for Goombanna merch, which is a weird moment to transition into the felony I committed, but I did promise. When I was a kid, I drew a smiley face on a neighborhood community mailbox, and since that's federal property, that's vandalization of federal property, which is a felony. Statute of limitations, baby! I like to think I made our mail person's day a little bit better now. And I hope this video made your day a little better. I'm gonna go do some light grocery shopping in this getup, but I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Goombanna is the wonder why she didn't come to play. Gaming vids that'll make you laugh and think and put them on replay. Intelligent, kind of funny, her community's #1. Stick around and kick your feet up. Goombanna has just begun.